Let's Talk JMMA with Charlie Jewett from sogo-kaku.com. This is a podcast about the deep end of Japanese combat sports scene. I'm your host, Shu Hirata from On the Road Management. Now, let's begin. Hey, Charlie.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. And good evening to everyone listening and watching us. Thank you very much again. And, I have to admit, I've been so busy for the last 2 weeks with a couple of new projects. So I'm a little bit off from so-called, inside info.
Yeah. Looks like you've been working on your website a little bit.
That too, but we have another project that I can't talk about it yet, but I hope it's going to be a very interesting one for the MMA fans as well,
Oh, very
So,
cool.
anyway, so let's talk about that RIZIN 34. They had the press conference.
Yes.
Mr. Hagiwara versus Dominator.
Yes.
Now, what's the reactions in Japan about this press conference? I mean, they really announced it very last minute. It's like after they went on sale.
I think the general impression is that they reacted, meaning that RIZIN's have been slow to announce a bunch of things.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I noticed, everyone was like, it's already mid-February and we don't know anything about any of these cards that are happening in like less than a month. But
right.
I think Hagiwara is insanely popular.
Yeah,
and they could put him against anybody, and I think it would do well, like ticket and attention-wise.
Sales, right. Now, let me tell you this. This is just only an opinion from one side of the Japanese MMA. That, Hagiwara is good. He's been proven. But it's not like he has a great record, and it's not like he's being considered from, like, promotions like a UFC or Bellator or even PFL kind of thing yet. And one chunk of the Japanese combat sports community who is basically addicted to UFC has this concept that maybe the RIZIN's shifting towards, like, people who's popular gets the spots first. So, like, winning in RIZIN might not even get a call from UFC kind of stuff. How do you feel about that?
Well, Hagiwara has clearly got some, he's a very exciting fighter. He also has holes in his game. Like, his grappling and wrestling isn't very good. I saw ahead of this event, he's actually training at Crazy Bee. So that just tells me he's trying to work on his wrestling a little bit, which is exciting. But yeah, I think you can carve out a little, like, for some reason, some of these Osaka fighters that are kind of like more brawler types, like him and Kentaro. It doesn't matter that much how much they win or lose. They have like this super devoted fan base.
Yeah, exactly. So the point is, they don't care if they get a call from any North American promotions and any of that, right? They're really looking at the record,
Yeah, like some of these guys, they made. I think Hagiwara talks about fighting abroad, but I don't know how realistic of an option that is for him.
I think World FC placed him on offer.
Right,
for the title fight.
Yeah, because Road FC always needs one tattooed Japanese guy to come over, and now that Sasaki hasn't been there for a while, they need Hagiwara. But so it seems like if he was smart, he would just stay in Japan because he's so popular here. Like when you go to a Deep show and a Deep Jewels show or a Pancrase show, and he shows up, people just swarm him, and it's probably even 10 times more popular in Osaka.
I think I totally agree. Of course, if I were him, I wouldn't even think about fighting in North America or anything like that. Even though if he even gets a call from, let's say, even UFC, he'd probably make way more money in Japan. But I think my point here is, like, I'm trying to explain here is that, did you see the news that Rei Tsuruya went to Pancrase instead of fighting for Deep the next?
I did not see that. That's big news.
Yeah, that is a big news. And on top of that, Taira signed him to UFC, which is the same group, right? Same team, pretty much, right?
So he is, because for people who don't know, he is the son of the coach of Ogikubo and Kana Asakura, who's been kind of this hot prospect in Deep.
Exactly.
So him going over to Pancrase is a big deal.
And I really think this way, I'm hearing from only one part of the Japanese combat sports that some fighter believes that fighting for Pancrase or Shuto will be a better opportunity to get, just to get a better possibility to get a call from UFC. So,
I would agree.
RIZIN,
I would say that at least historically,
Mm-hmm.
my general perception has been that Pancrase is the road to the UFC.
Right. Before
And
that was Shuto. Right.
Right. It was
Right.
Shuto, and then Pancrase
Mm-hmm.
was just like, if you did well in Pancrase, it might have been because they had the Fight Pass deal, or I don't know what was going on, but there just seemed to be like a direct route between the promotions.
Mm-hmm.
And RIZIN really hasn't. I mean, some fighters from RIZIN have gone to the UFC, but I don't think a single Japanese fighter has gone from RIZIN to the UFC. I think it's only been foreign fighters.
Exactly. Well, that's because partly most of the top guys in RIZIN has a contract with the RIZIN,
Right.
which will not allow them to go to UFC. And they're getting paid much better too. So,
Well, would the one exception be like Kanako Murata, but that's because RIZIN was willing to let her go because they didn't have a strawweight division.
no, they weren't willing to build that division, right?
Yeah. It's the only example I can think of, but that's one where they're just willing to let them go.
Yeah, that's true. But again, I can tell you this right now that I think I can reveal at this point. Before I got into Naoki's multi-fight deal negotiations, actually, they even suggested to contact UFC and see if they'll take him because they thought that he has a potential. So back then, he wasn't that really popular yet, after Trent Garden fight. So, they were actually willing to let him go,
Interesting.
So that could happen in RIZIN. But again, he turned out to be, end up beating a lot of guys and became popular there, right? So, and then the situation is totally different now. So, no, actually, you'd be surprised that RIZIN sometimes does something like, I don't know, generous, thing for the fighters. So you let you go, that type of stuff. So,
yeah.
Yeah,
but question about the Red Siraya going to Pancrase. Does that create? Is that like a thing that Deep will be upset with Pancrase about, or?
I don't think so. I'm pretty sure Mr. Tsuruya talked to Saeki before he even made that decision. So all these, behind the scenes to make sure everything's okay probably has been done. So it's not that big a deal,
Yeah, I think his gym. Actually, I think a lot of fighters from that gym fight for Pancrase. I think Kana Asakura fought for Pancrase back in the day.
Yeah.
I think that gym probably has more of a closeness to Pancrase.
Right. And another thing I can talk about is that featherweight champion. I don't know if he's champion there, but Isao. Obviously, he's getting the call from RIZIN and a few other promotions, but he's not taking it. And I'm hearing that even though he's up in age, he believes being a Pancrase, keep bringing the Pancrase, will get him to the UFC.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It is interesting, considering that he lost all the fights in Bellator, right, when he was in there. Right. So I don't know if he's that attractive a commodity from UFC's point of view, but that could happen. Who knows? But I just thinking about the mentality of fighters.
Well, it seemed like Pancrase used to have a business model where they would try to build fighters up, then sell them to the UFC.
Exactly.
Like Ren Nakai comes to mind. Shuri Kondo comes to mind.
Shuri Kondo, right? Abe Daichi Abe back then was like that too, right? And but again, that was back then when they were doing the Japan show, so they needed that, had a little bit more doors for the Japanese fighters. And now, obviously, Pancrase has changed a little bit, right? They're not even on the Fight Pass anymore.
Right.
So I wonder about that decision making for the fighters, because I actually believe it doesn't really matter which promotion you fight for. And that person who proved that the most is actually the Mr. Strasa Kiichi. He got upset by winning Heat. I mean, really, when you really think about that, so like matchmakers of UFC obviously are professional of analyzing fighters. So they will look at who you beat and how you won that fight instead of what promotion you fought for, is how I feel,
Yeah. So if you were advising a fighter, would it be to go into a promotion where you can get a lot of fights? And
well, let's talk like if you have a chance to get a title, of course, Shuto title or Pancrase title probably would be considered a little bit more valuable. But at this day and age, I never asked this to Sean or Mick, but I could totally picture them saying like, "Oh, I don't care, I don't care about the local," which I totally actually kind of agree if they said that. So right now, my advice would be with a fighter to fight for the local promotion, which make you active and has a possibility to fight a guy with a better record, and also has the UFC out clause on the contract. which a lot of fighter doesn't really negotiate in Japan. Like rights to leave the promotion if you get a call from UFC.
Like a lot of Japanese fighters seem obsessed with the idea of like fighting foreigners.
Exactly.
Do you think that's something the UFC cares about at all?
Depends who.
Okay.
I mean, if you fought somebody who lost, let's say, 5 out of the last 6 fights, who cares, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's another good point I was going to say, that maybe Pancrase promised Ray that they'll get foreign fighters in because obviously those restrictions are now getting lifted off by like next month, right?
Right.
I mean, it's like 3-day quarantine, stuff like that. So obviously, RIZIN or the other promotions, they could start bringing in non-Japanese fighters.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I will make sure to match you against American fighter on your next fight. That's actually a pretty good sales point to try to sign with the fighters in Japan, actually. So
yeah, because that's what I was thinking. Because Pancrase has a kind of strong history of bringing in foreign fighters to help develop their own.
Right. So if I were Pancrase matchmakers, I would be making calls to those guys who made it to Dana White's Contender Series but didn't get the contract. That type of guys, or who's waiting for the Dana White's Contender Series call this year, which is kind of hard to get because those guys think they'll get a call from UFC, so they tend to avoid going and travel like 14 hours and fight in Japan, So
yeah,
it's exactly right,
I'm looking at the comments. Speaking of Rising 34, I see that one question is, do you know why they're using that arena instead of the Osaka, Joe?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't have any either. And sounds like Koji and Kintaro are also planned for the card. So we're getting all of the Osaka boys on one card. So that makes sense.
Well, I could see that. That's a big card. I mean, if you put Koji in, I heard he'll sell at least 5,000 tickets.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Plus, Kintaro is also insanely popular in Osaka.
Right.
So you just need these 3 fighters, and you're going to sell out the entire event.
Exactly. And Strashakichi from Osaka, right? So
yeah.
And I don't know, you know this, but Strashakichi's brother is a very successful businessman in Osaka.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he does some business to do with the sewage type of stuff. I don't know exactly, but I think I told you this in podcast before, that when I met Strashakichi, which is like a long time ago, I would say maybe 10 years ago, when I was managing Dokon Jonosuke Mishima, which is his master, he was already driving white Mercedes.
Yeah, you did say that.
Very young. He was driving Mercedes then, so,
Yeah, anyway, all I remember from him is some old promotional video for the UFC where he went to like a really rough part of Osaka where there's like a bunch of angry homeless people that didn't want to be filmed. And he was saying he was from this area and everything, but apparently the white Mercedes might say otherwise.
But I would have to say Osaka Joe has to be probably a little bit more expensive than Maruzen Intec Arena. That's a known venue, and it's a little bit bigger, I think. And maybe they couldn't get that date. Who knows? I don't know. I haven't checked their schedules, But yeah, but anyway, another thing I wanted to mention is that I don't know if a lot of fans noticed that, but the RIZIN officially changed the main sponsor. Remember, it's so famous about the Yogibo, and now fighters can no longer get the Yogibo, couch or pillow if they win the fight now.
Yeah, I saw that. It looks like they're. Is that a decision by Yogibo, or do you think RIZIN is just switching things up?
I think so, but did you know the news about the Yogibo actually bought the headquarters of the US? So now instead of being a licensee in Japan, they actually made more money in Japan. They turned around and bought their parent company.
Oh, so it's like 7-Eleven?
Yeah, it's almost like a Mr. Donuts, right?
Yeah,
Mr.
exactly.
Donuts, right. So, yeah, exactly. So now Yogibo is stepping up, and I heard they're signing with the racing team, or they're making own racing team. Right, so they're really pouring more money on, obviously sponsoring racing teams way more than sponsoring MMA promotion. So maybe there's.
Plus, it seemed like a lot of their support at least seemed to be based off of the fact that the president liked Yachi.
That too,
but maybe Yachi hasn't been doing so well recently.
That's true, but again, I think I'm hearing that they have some good, maybe hedge fund or some fund manager behind it. So yeah, exactly. So they have the money to invest, and that's why they're stepping up in terms of these sponsorships. And obviously they're doing well. I mean, you see Yogibo shops in Japan, right?
Oh yeah, and
in the States,
everybody wants one. And if you look it up, those things aren't cheap. So if they're selling them, they're making money.
Oh really? I mean, not that cheap? I don't know. I never really bothered.
No, those things aren't. I think they're well over $100 for one of those chairs. Those like
Okay.
I just don't think I could ever rationalize buying a beanbag chair.
I thought, I thought that beanbag chair is a little too big for the Japanese household. Because they're a little small, right? Compared to.
Well, I mean, it looks like the design of the chair would be like perfect if you were like playing video games or something.
I see.
But yeah, I mean, it seems like a really random thing to have in your tiny apartment.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, anyway, so then I want to talk about this new sponsor for just the hardcore fans out there. That this new sponsor, Shonen Bio Clinic, which is like beauty clinic. You'd be surprised. This company has, I think, 78 clinics all over Japan, and they are very specialized in cosmetic surgeries or like maxillofaciology or remove hair removals for
so they do like
people.
When you say like that, are you saying like they're doing like Botox and stuff like that?
I don't know if they do Botox, but it's really funny. They recently had some partnership with another clinic who specializes in like just fixing your mouth, and I don't really know the medical terminology on that, but it's really, I mean, it really is geared towards a high end, like client. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I think it's called like, I think they also do oral surgeries, everything to do with the looks. But anyway, when you
they can make a lot of money doing that.
Oh, exactly. That's my point. If they have 70, 80, close to 80 clinics all over Japan, and also I think they have clinics in Vietnam and some Southeast Asia.
Interesting.
And it's very interesting because a lot of transgender people go there, right, to finish up their work. Some procedures in Japan are illegal, so they go to finish it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, so a lot of people might think, oh, they lost the Yogi, blah 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 blah. But this new sponsor is a big time, too.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure they'll pay. They could afford to stick around. So
I think a giant beauty clinic like that's gonna be those types of stores in Japan. They charge so much and they make so much money.
Oh, I know. I mean,
interesting.
Yeah, it's going to the so-called good hands, I guess. What they call it. Yeah. But anyway, so let's talk about. I think there's 2 shows coming up this week, which is RIZIN Trigger Second and Deep 106. Which one do you want to talk about first? RIZIN Trigger?
Yeah, let's talk about Trigger first.
Okay.
I don't have too much to say.
Why is that?
On paper, I feel like this might be one of the worst RIZIN cards that's been put together. That's more of a joke about not having much to say, but like the first, I guess this is what we can expect from Trigger cards, is that the first 2 or 3 fights, like the co-main event up, are going to be like really interesting. And then the bottom of it is just going to be them desperately trying to fill out a card with local fighters.
That too. Yeah.
Any MMA event that has 5 kickboxing matches on it just reeks to me that they couldn't find enough fighters to fill it out.
Well, that MMA fights, because it's so hard for them now. Because when you really think about it, right, they're putting out shows pretty often now, right?
Yes.
In the span of 4 weeks, they're putting like 3 shows, or whatever. So, including Landmark.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so when in a situation when you can't bring foreign fighters in from outside of Japan, it's really it's limited resources of fighters.
Oh, because I mean, the RIZIN Trigger 1 had some fun. The fights were fun, and it came out well, but it also kind of had like the similar like random karate guy with a gi on, like people you've never heard of, people like in their 40s and 50s fighting.
True.
And so you got a lot of that on this. So it's hard for me to get excited for the undercard, except that there are a couple of like, when Trigger was first described, I thought it'd be like a way to build prospects up and give veterans a new show. And there are a couple fights on their undercard where it's like, oh, these are some interesting prospects. These are some interesting new fighters that could potentially one day be fighting on a numbered show. But it also seems like a lot of them are like, this guy's 49, this guy's 47. They're both 50-50 records. So,
you know what? I totally agree with what you're saying, but there's one other way to look at it. Is I think in Japan now, at least the RIZIN, the brand name, is almost like it's doing pretty well. That I think it's fair to say majority of people heard about it, right? So it's almost like same way that UFC was marketing in North America in the beginning, where you go to UFC shows, you may not know all the fighters, but you do go to UFC shows, so you enjoy that fact.
Right.
So maybe that's what's happening, especially when the RIZIN is going to now, like the places they've never been to. I mean, this time they've been to Shizuoka, but like not too often there, right? So,
well, I think if I were, my guess for the business model of this would be the Trigger shows are like a low budget numbered show. They don't do the VTRs, they don't do the intros, they don't have like a lot of the hoopla associated with the bigger
but
events.
I think they do though this time.
Okay. Well, we'll see, because they didn't do it on the first show, so we'll have to wait and see if they do it on this show. But and what they do is they get a lot of local fighters on the undercard, and they use those guys to sell tickets to local people.
I'm so bad. I should go look through emails. I like daily, I arrange so much thing for fighters, like shooting and photo shoots, and they miss medicals and blah blah blah, all kind of stuff. And I don't know if they did the shooting for Uruka for those opening videos this time. If they did, then they were gonna do it, right? I mean,
well, Trigger, the first one, I think they only had VTRs for like the main and the co-main event. I don't think the other fights had VTRs.
All right. And I can tell you this, then, I tell you this for the fans, that Uruka is going to go back to the nice old way of doing little performance for the walkout.
Oh, very nice.
Event. So we have a couple of performers ready to be in there. So, yeah, so I think it's going to be a little bit more fancy than the first Trigger card, I think.
Well, my thing is, the interesting thing about the model is, I think that the main and the co-main event are there to sell pay-per-views. Those are like the fights with fighters that people have heard of. Those are the fighters that are popular. I mean, Sasaki is quite popular. Some of the people I go to events with, they like him a lot. Kuramoto's kind of this young up-and-coming guy. Yamaniha, not Yamaniha. I don't know why I said that. He's fighting on a different event. Koike, I mean, I don't know if Koike is popular. I mean, he's popular in that area, so helps sell tickets. But people know who he is
in that area, and he's so-called pride of prefecture of Shizuoka now, right?
Right, so. Exactly. But I meant pay-per-view wise, his strength is that, like, name recognition, is that he's been so dominant. I think all the Japanese fight fans know who he is.
Yeah.
And so when they see that he's fighting Sasaki, it sounds like a really big fight, because it is.
Right.
And that'll help sell pay-per-views.
And they're both from Shizuoka.
Right.
Right. I mean, and actually, to answer your question, there's a comment there asking me about the ticket sales, but I think they're doing fairly well. And each fighters are selling really good number of tickets, and
Well, I would think it would do well, because the way that this is like a regional show, and so the way the regional shows work in Japan is each fighter usually sells a bunch of tickets to, like, people in their gym, their fans, their family, and so there's a ton of local fighters on this, so they're going to be able to move a lot of tickets.
Right.
And then you have Sasaki and Koike, who are both really popular.
Right, they both are popular, and and I don't mean to brag here, but the last 3 fights, all of are involved with our clients here. So I would like to talk about Mr. Takumi Suzuki, who is also from Clever Koike's gym.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and he's actually a lightweight, so he's same weight class as Satoshi, which is the current champion. So it's so funny that he publicly said that he's not looking to be a RIZIN champion, because he knows he's not going to be able to beat his master.
Yeah, so I was actually asking about that, because I saw him fight Kitaoka, so I'm familiar with him. And the guy, We Are Rising, the host, Andrew, said it was kind of, he never thought he had heard someone say, "I just want to be the gatekeeper. That, like, I don't want to be the champion, but if people beat me, they get to fight the champion," kind of situation.
Yeah, exactly. So he wants to be the gatekeeper for his master. The guy actually joined the bonsai gym when he was like end of high school, and was hoping to become a pro. And since then, so Satoshi has been teaching him and taking him to the lead to the pro and everything else. So
it's kind of interesting, because when I saw him fight, he came across as more of a striker than a jiu-jitsu guy. But that might just be because he was fighting Kitaoka.
Right, that too. And I don't know if you noticed that, but that was his first finish in his career.
Yeah, I had
actually joke him and nickname him as Mr. The Decision King. So
yeah, yeah, it's kind of interesting. So
right, and I think in this fight he believes that he's superior to Akira in every single department except maybe a physical, meaning the physical strength.
yeah, Akira does look quite strong, but Akira is one of those interesting guys that I think RIZIN's unique way of promoting has made him
Well,
like somewhat
exactly. So
popular.
for those who doesn't know about him, I guess he does some YouTube videos with Ishwatari, and he does something
Yeah.
interesting thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's the type of guy who can eat a lot or get a lot of hits with no pain or whatever.
Yeah. And he's also like, I mean, when they showed that stuff with him and Gomi, it seemed like he was almost like mentally disabled. Like he's not able to speak to Gomi. Like he's like super shy.
Well, that's because Gomi is his master.
Yeah, and then Gomi hit him after the last fight.
Yeah. So, well, here's what it is. In the Japanese world, it's almost like a military. Like once you're like a superior, you're superior the rest of your life, period.
Yeah.
You know? So, I mean, yeah, so I don't think Akira would never be able to speak up, you know what I mean? Like against Gomi, unless if it's something really necessary, but I'm pretty sure that's not gonna happen. So yeah, so and also a lot of people didn't realize this maybe, but another card underneath that, Mr. Sora Yamamoto, his father fought for the UFC Japan show.
Oh, really?
He fought Pat Miletich in UFC Japan, and also he was the winner of the 4-man Japanese-only UFC Japan tournament that took place in UFC Japan show. And he's from the UWF Pro Wrestling promotion.
Oh, I did not know that at all.
Yeah, exactly. So he's from Hokkaido, you know, which is like, from the northern island of Japan. So it's not like, so it's a rare case in the sense that he trains there with his father and then, of course, the teammates, and not training in, not too often in Tokyo, area.
So how do you think he's going to do against the bouncer?
I don't know, because I thought he was going to do, he's okay, but it didn't really impress me in his last fight. And I don't know too much about the bouncer too, so maybe this is a good matchup.
Well, so talking to the guys, they kept saying that Nee has been like talking about how he let down the bouncer community, and now he has to come back. I wasn't aware that there was a bouncer community, so
exactly. I don't think bouncers care,
Yeah, like the only bouncers I know of are Megumi Yabushita and her friend. So
Yoko Takahashi.
Yeah, exactly.
My favorite girls. I mean, I told you about that, right? What they do.
They're bouncers, right?
Yeah, they're bouncers. But main work they do is, of course, they stop fights and stuff. But more than anything, they had to carry a drunken, passed out client to the nearest subway station. That's what they do.
Well, I've gotten drunk at a lot of places, and no one's offered to carry me to the station before. So
they do. They're very nice people, and the fact that they're girls, but they can carry pretty much anybody is amazing, right?
Well, I got to start drinking there then. I'm tired of walking. I'm walking to these stations like a sucker.
I'm telling you, this girl, Yoko Takahashi, those who is listening to this show, who doesn't know who she is, she's actually a MMA fighter. I mean, the very first professional female MMA fighter.
The pioneers. They're the very first Japanese, yeah.
And she fought Christian Cyborg. Right? It took her to the 3 rounds. It was only 3 minutes per round era, but still took her to the 3 round. It was a brawl. And but funny thing is that Yoko's so big, her hand is bigger than my hand. It's like a guy. Oh yeah, it's amazing. And the funny story is, like, he looks like a guy. So when I walk down the street on Roppongi, a lot of salesmen on the street will ask her to go to the hostess club, thinking she's the man. And in the morning rush hour, you know how like the specific train car is only for the female only. She walks in, she gets yelled by the other people, saying, "You're not allowed to go there."
That's got to be annoying. That's got to be annoying.
But anyway, go back to, so Trigger is going to be Wednesday. Everybody is going to Shizuoka, I think, as of tomorrow.
Right. For those who don't know, Wednesday's the Emperor's birthday. So that's why it's a national holiday. So that's why the show is on a Wednesday.
Now, are you going there, or are you going to watch this on pay-per-view?
I'll watch it on pay-per-view. It's not that far from Tokyo. It's only like an hour train ride from Tokyo, but I don't like to travel that far and then have to turn around and come back the same day.
That's true. And it still costs you a couple $100 on Shinkansen, right? So
yeah, exactly.
So it's not exactly that cheap. You and your girlfriend, a wife, will cost $400.
Yeah.
Plus eat, drink, whatever. That's $500 tickets. $700, $800.
Yeah, it adds up pretty quickly.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
How do you feel about the Harry Stallone fight on the card?
I really don't know much about him. Who is this guy?
Okay, so his record is absolutely hilarious. So he's 2-4. Okay,
2-4. Okay,
but two of his losses,
yeah.
I think, are or at least one of his losses is a DQ for like illegal kicks to a grounded opponent. And so RIZIN might be home for him if he wants to do a bunch of soccer kicks.
Wow. I mean, what's his background? I don't even know anything about it. They say he's a grappler, but he kicks somebody's in the head.
He seems a little unhinged. A lot of crazy kind of results on his record, which kind of matches his opponent, Takeshi.
Right, he's from LA. Yeah.
Who also has kind of a crazy record. So
he does,
while they both have losing records, I expect this fight to kind of be nuts. And I think they said Takeshi's writing his own book, and he's like giving all of the proceeds to charity or something.
Really? That's nice.
Yeah.
I mean, but this is, I mean, I don't know anything about this Harry Stone guy. I mean, what promotion he fought for? I mean,
my only thought is they found a guy with a foreign name. Like, gotta slap him on this card so we can put a Brazilian flag on there.
So that's not that bad. But they said his strength is Kimura and the mental strength. I mean, I don't know what it is. Yeah.
Jamie mentions that your Yamamoto lost the UFC Japan belt to Genki Sudo. So
that's true. That's very true. Yeah, yeah. That's yeah.
Yeah, then Daniel said he did get DQ'd for throwing the grounded knees to an opponent. So this is one of those fights that I feel like might just have like a crazy result. So I'm kind of interested to see what happens.
Well, here's what it is. So there's an entertainment aspect to it.
Yes, exactly.
Right? I mean, yeah. So it's like a toy box of a combat sports, is what like Mr. Saeki says once in a while, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the fight I'm looking forward to the most is actually the Kuramoto fight.
Oh, you know what? I think this fight's going to be, if, what's his name? Kuramoto has to stand and strike, it's going to be dangerous. So I can do this right now. He's going to have to take this to ground.
Well, that's what my thought, my prediction was that, even if he feels confident in his striking because of his last fight, I feel like he needs to just come in, win, get like a good dominant win on the ground. And that's what I kind of expect.
I think what he's going to say, which he's been saying this publicly, is that same thing what he did on the Imanari Raw Ecstasy, whatever, that grappling event, that he feels.
I heard he beat the shit out of that guy with open palm strikes.
Open palm strikes. He feels the open palm strikes, you know, the palm part is much harder than this fist part on open finger gloves. So he feels when you're on the top, dropping the fist, especially on 12-6 position, you're allowed to do that because it's not elbow. I mean, he feels open palm is way more devastating.
Yeah, and for those that are interested, you can actually see that it's on the Abima's YouTube channel. I know some people expressed some interest in watching that, but I heard he bloodied his opponent and messed him up with those open palm strikes.
Exactly. So that, I mean, I could see that, right? I mean, you remember the old Pancrase Boss Rutan fight?
Oh yeah. Well, I remember Boss Rutan talking about if you worked on it, he actually liked it because you didn't have to worry about breaking your hands.
That's actually even true, though. I mean, this part's much more hard. Palm part's harder, and I mean, the fist, right, on open palm, especially when you're exposed that much. I mean, it's really risky.
Well, especially with ground and pound when they're like moving around on there and you don't know exactly what you're hitting at what angle you're hitting it. So I can see what he's getting at. Yeah.
Yeah. So this could be the new thing, right? Who knows?
And Kato's kind of, I mean, exactly. And Kato's kind of interesting because I feel like he came in, he lost in RIZIN, and then I feel like they blatantly brought him in to lose to Ersin Yamamoto. But he didn't lose to Ersin Yamamoto. So then RIZIN's been keeping him around.
Right, yeah. And I think to begin with, he must sell a lot of tickets in that area. Because the first time he fought for RIZIN was against Kintaro in Shizuoka too, right? I believe.
Right.
Yeah, so no, it has to be one of the major reasons that he's in there.
Well, he's from there. He's from there.
Right, and he's 1-1 in RIZIN now, so he's deserved to get a third shot, you know?
I think he's actually 2-1 in RIZIN now.
2-1. Who else did he win and beat?
He beat Fujiwara and he beat Yamamoto.
Yeah, that's right. He beat Fujiwara. Yeah.
He fought on the first Trigger show.
That's true. Yeah, I'm sorry. I missed that. Yeah.
No.
But yeah, exactly. So he deserves to be in there, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of interesting. I love to see these guys that were kind of brought in to lose, and they kind of defy the expectation, and they start winning.
Like Xi'an,
And
too, right? I mean,
yeah, so exactly. And so, but I got a favor Kuramoto to win this, and I'm hoping to see a lot of suplexes because I love it when the guy suplexes people.
I tell you this, he said that on the interview. I think it's going to be open pretty soon with American media. Like 2 nights ago, he's like, I'm definitely going to suplex. And he has this secret suplex, which is more devastating than German suplex and blah, blah, blah. Immediately after that, I talked to him privately. The first thing I said is, dude, don't just insist on suplex. I don't care about this. Go and win this fight, For him, he's got to win this one. So, but he feels the open palm strike is going to be the key because he feels he's got to take him down, which everybody has to know that's what he's looking to do, right? Against a strike.
Yeah.
In a way, I think it's interesting. The last two fights, I think I'm not going to be private about it because I think almost all fans know what each opponents are looking to do, right? So, each fighters are looking to do. So, I think in that sense, it's going to be interesting.
Well, even though he lost his last fight, I was super impressed with just how he kept going after it after he got badly hurt.
Right.
And so he's got a really good fighting spirit. I hate to sound like one championship, but he's got like a really good fighting spirit, and his endurance was just off the charts. So it was nuts.
Yeah, I mean, guy was a 3-time Greco-Roman wrestling champion, and when you're that elite wrestler, their cardio, they're just monsters, right? I mean,
I know that. And speaking of promotion, I know that RIZIN did release like the version of Confession for Trigger, and he was in it. And I think his wife and his kid are also in it. So they are promoting him and the main event. And so there has been a little bit more promotion than the first Trigger show already.
Right, yeah. No, and Kuramoto is actually, as you know, his wife is a gold medal winner, And so there's a lot of angles to try to promote him,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about Landmark then, which is their next show after that. Now, it seems like Mr. Ren Yamamoto is always being talk about Japanese combat sports. I mean, how is it? Is everybody still talking about this card, him against Suzuki in Japan?
Oh yeah. I think the general consensus is the Landmark card is more interesting than the Trigger card.
Really?
And I think the reason for that is that Trigger has the really big fights on it, but also has a bunch of fights of people that people haven't heard of. Where Landmark, people will look at it and they only see the 3 fights, but they're all really big stars.
That's true. You recognize every single one of them.
So it doesn't if it makes sense, it doesn't get diluted. Like when you look at the Trigger card, you're like, oh, I know them, don't know them, don't know them, don't know them, don't know them. Where with Landmark, you're like, I've heard of all these people.
Yeah, I know. And as a Landmark, they're not going to have maybe 1 or 2 more cards. That's it, right? So
yeah, I think they said 5, but I wouldn't be surprised if that number changes.
You know what's so funny? I only care about my client, so I only care about something to do with the client. So I never care about how many total fights they're going to have. So it's a good thing you told me. So they're thinking about 5 fights.
Well, I think they said that, but I mean, they change their mind all the time. The first one was 4.
Did they already announce Ringo Cage?
Cage, I believe. They said they now have their own cage.
Yeah, they do have their own cage, but
they had to borrow the deep cage for the first one. And now they're actually using their own cage.
Details, but they're going to announce soon. I know that which one is going to be, but I'll tell you the hint: the crane shots and
cool,
and maybe drone.
Maybe it's like selective. But I'm more interested in Landmark, so maybe that's why I think people are more interested in Landmark. And I'm more interested in Landmark because I know that the first event, no one international got to see it, but they will be able to see this one.
Right.
But Landmark did a bunch of crazy stuff that I liked because it showed they were trying. I mean, they had drone cameras, they had like a 360 screen, and they had the very limited audience. So it all felt very like elite Fight Club kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And I liked how they were testing new stuff. So that's why I liked it.
And they did really well selling the pay-per-view, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even the next set, it's more than Southern All-Stars, which is like selling more than Beatles.
Yeah, exactly. So, and plus, I mean, this is the main event with Kuramoto and Suzuki's perfect. Because Suzuki seems to have this mindset of like, you're either going to finish me in a minute or I'm going to finish you in a minute. Like if it's on the ground, it's on the feet. He goes in there to knock you out, get knocked out, or submit. So
Sure,
I think he's kind of the perfect kind of aggressive opponent for Hiramoto.
Exactly, and obviously, I'm not, I think Suzuki's a great fighter. As looking at all of his interviews, I think he's a great guy. Oh my God, he's such a nice kid. I think
Yeah.
So if I'm not a Ren's manager, I would be cheering for him. But but the fact is, like, even though Suzuki had like 4 or 5 fights in Pancrase before, he turned to kickboxing and came back, so he does have more MMA experience, but he's not a real hardcore grappler or wrestler, like that. So I think this one would be either a striking bout, or Ren might even surprise everybody by taking him down and show some, combat wrestling. Who knows, right?
You think this has the thing that sometimes happens where 2 kickboxers fight and it becomes a sloppy, like, white belt level grappling show?
I hope not, though. I hope not. Because I've been telling Rand he should not really try something so new. You know what I mean? Something he feels it's solid, but he still have to rely on his strength, which is striking. The same for Suzuki, right? I hope,
Just before it happens, we don't know. It's all just preview, but I think this is kind of the perfect type of match making for Hiramoto. You get a guy with some MMA experience. He's primarily a striker. And so it lets Hiramoto, win or lose, kind of fight at someone at the same MMA level as him.
Yeah, exactly.
And it helps build him up.
Right. So, and come on, that's a good fight, right, for him.
Oh, yeah.
And we had a lot of discussions, and this is the fight I pushed it. And I can do this right now that, I told you they had 3 choices they gave us. We say okay to all 3, but you know how Suzuki had the fight in kickboxing fight in the end of January?
Yes.
And the moment the landmark got postponed, I actually pushed this fight. I called RIZIN and said, hey, let's just make this fight happen. And Suzuki won that fight. And he can tell he's no injuries, period. So let's even talk about the other 2. I
think Jamie said that in his last fight, he was super aggressive too. So he thinks that Ren has a chance to catch him, like in the Shoji fight.
And this is going to be very, they're both a very solid striker. And anybody who's seen Ren's kickboxing bout, he can take a hit and he can, do.
So what's Ren's second situation going to be like?
Right. Now, I'm telling this from the business.
So since Ren can't bring in Pettis or somebody, who's going to be in his corner?
Ishwatari.
Oh, nice.
He's been training at the cave.
Yeah.
So, he has a pretty good base there, too. But after this fight, win or lose, he's going to go back to Milwaukee. And at the same time, he'll be applying for the visa, which will probably take him 3 to 6 months to get approval and all kinds of stuff. So he'll probably stay there 3 months and come back one more time. And hopefully by then, he can do the interview and get visa and move permanently,
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, here's one more thing for the hardcore fans. I'm very interested in what kind of pay-per-views they're going to sell on this show.
Right, because the first one sold a bunch, but Mikuru is on the card, so it's kind of an asterisk. So it's kind of interesting to see. Okay, now let's see how well Hiramoto does.
Exactly. Let me tell you this very interesting story. Like you mentioned in the part of the beginning of the podcast that we worked on this new website, and of course I see a traffic to the websites every day. And it's a website. It's not a social network. It's not a Twitter or Instagram. It's not like people logs in every day. So I'll tell you this: like top guys generally gets about 1,000 to 2,000 views per day. Okay, that's pretty average. And the other guys maybe 500, 600. That's still a lot considering that's a website. Now, the biggest, I would say, second biggest is Naoki, who gets about 2,000. Now, guess how much Ren gets per day?
It's gonna be a big number, isn't it? Is it gonna be like
per day? Websites, though. It's a website. It's a profile page. It's not like a social network. None of that, right?
I have no idea. What do you think it would be?
14,000 average.
I was going to guess 10, but okay, interesting.
That's is interesting. And for websites, that's a lot.
Yeah.
For daily traffic. Right. So
you got to put some ads on that page, Shu. Start making some money.
I mean, really, like that's my point here is that Ren, like just Mikuru or even like a Koji or even maybe Kintaro, those guys has their own market.
Yeah, definitely.
If you sell, let's say even not 100, but let's say solid 50,000 pay-per-views every time you're on, and those pay-per-views are sold for $30 to $40. You do the math.
Yeah.
No, I mean, really.
I will say also, Hitamoto's fan base is kind of perfect for this because they're younger.
Exactly.
And the younger guys are going to be the ones more interested in the weed sponsor, the CBD oil sponsored
Exactly, right.
pay per
And the
view.
bottom line is, yeah, Hiramoto used to star in a reality TV show by Abema, which is another young audience, right? He used to date the young model. I forgot the name, but
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm very interested in how much pay-per-view this is going to sell from managerial point of view, because
I'm just upset that my landmark staple Shuto Watanabe or Imanari aren't on the card. I would have liked to seen one of them back on instead of like a Suzuki or somebody, but hopefully there'll be a future one.
Now, I'm going to tell you this interesting thing about managerial point of view, which I can reveal this, that Ren is on a 3-fight contract, which means he's got 2 fights left.
Okay.
Now, what if he wins this one, score big pay-per-views? He's got only 1 fight left rising. Any managers in the world will think about big bump, right, on the next contract.
Yeah.
Now, you know what? I had a long talk with Naoki, who is like, I told him to rest because he's got a big, he got a huge 3 fights, right? In New Year's Eve, he got injured. He wouldn't rest. He wants to train all the time. I told him, dude, resting is, sometimes it's, part of the practice, and you're professional. You have to think about like winning fights maybe twice a year, 3 times a year. You don't get to fight 5 times a year. You know what I mean? And sometimes fight is not only about the record. And I told him this, like, look at Ren. He's 0-1. Has way more access to his, program page than you are. And if he wins next 2, I'm going to demand more money than you make.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
especially if he fights. I mean, if he sells a bunch of Landmark shows, I might just keep him on Landmark and try to get that pay-per-view money.
Exactly. Then I would prefer to negotiate the solid pay-per-view shares.
Yeah.
I mean, that he's going to be like, he may end up making more money than anybody in the history of MMA for like first 5 fights. Who knows, right?
That'd be nuts. Yeah, that'd be crazy. Yeah,
it will be nuts. And, what's interesting about this is like, remember Sakakibara said about Takeru versus Tenshin? He's looking to open their purse. He
wants to. Does that mean he wants to show how much money they're making?
Exactly. He's willing to publicly announce how much Tenshin Takeru will be making or are making and all of that. And I wish he started announcing pay-per-view shares how much those guys are making, because that might really rock the entire industry. I really think so.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, think about it. Let's say if
you're very interested to see how much Tenshin and Takeru are getting paid, because if they're willing to show, that means they're making a lot.
Exactly. Right. Here's the bottom line. Let's say like theoretically, right? Let's say, I don't care. Let's say Ren made $1 million on pay-per-view on his next fight, whatever. How would you feel if you're a fighter fighting in North America?
Oh, I got to get on one of these rising shows now. Get me on one of those rising shows.
Yeah, exactly. So I really wish that Sakakibara would do it, to tell the truth, because it's going to be very interesting,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially for that fight, that'd be very interesting.
Yeah, and that's maybe the new business model, right? That could maybe try to follow in America too, because maybe the top stars will realize that they can do their own stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of the fighter pay, I was kind of interested. Do you want to talk about the Itsuki Monster sponsorship?
Oh yeah, let's talk about that too. Okay, let's talk about Itsuki. Yeah. Go ahead.
So speaking of fighter pay, she is the first MMA fighter in Japan to be signed by Monster Energy Drink.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a giant company. That's a giant sponsor she has there.
Giant sponsorship. I don't know how much money she's making, but it's giant, right?
Well, when you looked on the Monster Energy page, the Japanese one, she was all over it. Like, they were promoting the hell out of the fact that they had a new signed athlete and it was her. Right. And so first off, how does she get to this point? I don't think it's because she fights for one championship. I think almost all of her success is from Abema TV.
It is. It has to.
She first got started on that reality show, and that's how she got the one championship contract. Is she won the tournament on Abema TV?
Yeah. Sure.
All of her fights are aired on Abema TV.
Yeah.
And before her fights, they show her old fights. So like, if there's a one championship event coming up that's essentially has Itsuki on it, you can guarantee an hour before that they're showing her most recent fights.
Right.
And so Abema TV has invested on their YouTube channel. They have videos of her at photo shoots, or like her learning English, or like her at the beach. So she is obviously one of the people that Abima is like, this is a marketable person, and this is who we're going to be making the face kind of women's MMA on Abima TV.
I mean, it's kind of obvious from Abima's point of view. Aoki and Itsuki are the two big names that they have, like, control. I wouldn't say control over, but obviously they're working hands in hands, right? With these,
those are the two people that Abima TV promotes the most,
right?
And it works even more that Itsuki and Aoki are friends, so they're able to make videos together, which is even better. And I mean, she's undefeated. She's super young. I mean, it's easy to forget how young she is.
Exactly, right.
And she's like undefeated. Looks like she could get a title shot in the near future. So it's almost perfect for them.
Right. I mean, I'll tell you this. I won't reveal names, but I had a couple of female Japanese clients calling me. It says, "How come she can get at Monster Energy, not me?" Kind of stuff. She's like, okay, off the record, because those fighters believe that she's protected. Her matchmaking is, it's always in her favor.
Well, it's not because of that, because I think she would still be popular if she had lost those fights. Abima doesn't market her off of her fights.
Exactly.
I mean, she's got the mixture of, she's got charisma. She's kind of goes against the grain. She's kind of outspoken. She's like a little female Ren Hiramoto.
Yeah.
She's very direct. She gets in Twitter wars. She calls people out. She says crazy stuff.
Right. And she now these days she's showing her sexy stuff too, right? Showing her.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She shows like bikini pictures, and her fan base,
Japanese idol, right?
Yes.
Like a culture too. So
yeah, and she is or was dating Ursa Yamamoto. It seems like they're always like breaking up and getting back together.
Yeah, it seems like,
yeah. But I mean, so she's kind of part of like this young Japanese counterculture.
Yeah, exactly.
Like she's got a bunch of tattoos. She's into like skateboarding. She's into hip hop, and she's really outspoken. So I think that's why she's marketable.
Well, I mean, I really hate to say this, but I know Hayaka or Mizuki or Kanako, they'll kill me for saying this, but I think at this point she's already making more money than any of those girls put together on
I would guarantee it. Just, I mean, you got to think about it. Itsuki's smart with her marketing. Like when she goes on Instagram, she does like Instagram lives. She goes on and talks to fans. She does YouTube stuff. And some fighters like Ayaka Hamasaki comes to mind, never really seemed that interested in doing stuff like that. They're like, my results speak for me. I'll go out and be the best fighter in the world.
Reason, I think I attract clients who's never interested in the YouTube or any of the Twitters and all kinds of stuff. I'm telling you, like, lots of my guys just refuse to do it. They're like, no.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can respect that. Like, if it's not something you're into, don't force it. Like,
exactly,
because
like, you're not good at it.
It comes across worse. Like if you're doing it bad and it's forced, people are going to think you're fake.
Exactly. I mean, I don't know if you realize that, but Naoki is the only guy who hasn't done any YouTube since that New Year's Eve fight. I mean, all the fighters out there lost, who lost or who won, whatever, they all did some kind of videos, right? Reporting, saying thank you to the sponsor, whatever that is,
I don't know about the US, but Japan, it's so oversaturated.
It is.
Unless you're really good at it, I wouldn't even bother doing it almost.
I really think so. Right now, I think fighters should realize they cannot be doing the same thing over and over, and they're all doing the same thing. And then that's when the Mikuru, I give him credit, because what he's doing totally different from the others. The other fighters all talk about predictions and, what do you think about that fight or this signing and It's very interesting.
Well, I mean, going back to Itsuki, she doesn't have a YouTube channel.
No, exactly.
She's not on YouTube. She does Instagram pretty much exclusively, and she's on Abima TV. They do some interesting stuff, but it's just her own charisma that seems to be getting all of this support, and a lot of it seems to be international. The one championship mix is a lot of her fan base does seem to be international.
Yeah,
which one championship does a good job of promoting their fighters throughout the world, so that makes sense.
Right. I mean, no, exactly. The bottom line is this: that Mikuru and stuff, they got popularity from YouTube to the show, obvious.
Yes.
But look at Koji when he exploded in terms of like number of follows and stuff. That's because he started winning Bellator championship, all kinds of stuff. It's not about YouTube or any of that. He started after that anyway, right?
Oh, do you mean Horiguchi?
Horiguchi, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you said Koji. I'm like, what?
No.
You said Koji. You said his first name. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Right, Horiguchi, right. But Koji, does Koji have a big YouTube thing or?
He does. I think Koji has a big YouTube channel.
I don't really follow that. So, but anyway,
it's kind of she's kind of more like, I don't know. I'd say she's more like she's like a mixture of Ren and Kyoji. She's more outspoken than Kyoji, but she hasn't been super into the YouTube stuff. So I'd say she's more of like,
I think she can claim she's sort of like Kyoji if she wins that one title. The only thing she's missing is actually a title, because a lot of people criticize her that she's being protected in terms of getting favorable matchmake, matchup.
But I mean,
again,
couldn't you say that about almost every fighter in one championship? Like I don't know if it's favorable matchmaking, but I think one championship once finishes, and so they tend to do like a little old Strike Force style matchmaking, where you have Robbie Lawler fighting Matt Finland and stuff like that.
Right, but obviously, like they like to promote Japanese fighters too, right?
Yes.
Obviously, they're working hands in hands with the BEMA, which is fine. It's a business, so yeah. So
I she is clearly the face of Japanese MMA in one championship.
Oh, definitely. I mean, yeah, and so I hope somebody will follow her, right? Because it's always nice to see.
So I guess my question is, how much money do you think like a monster deal would be like this would be worth?
It's so funny that I can't talk about it, which I tell you, but like some of the UFC sponsorship for like body water, that kind of stuff. They get a monthly pay, blah blah blah. From my point of view, it's not that impressive because I'm so used to see those good sponsorship in Japan. However, compared to other North American sponsorship, it's pretty damn good. So there's a gap there, and I think it's from North Americans' regular sponsorship point of view. I think Itsuki's deal is very, very good, but not sure if it's as good as, let's say, for example, the pachinko maker, the game maker who sponsors Asakura Brothers. I'm pretty sure much higher there.
Well, I wonder how. There's so many factors to take into consideration, but since she's the only MMA fighter I know of in Japan sponsored by Monster, and so it kind of shows that. Do you know anyone else?
No, I mean, even in UFC, only a handful of fighters get sponsored by Monster.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of interesting to show that Monster in Japan is like making this investment into MMA.
Exactly.
So it'll be interesting to see if they bring more fighters aboard, or if they are more interested in her as a specific branding tool.
Let's see. I mean, I think it's specific branding. Because I mean, to me, if I'm a Monster, it really doesn't make sense to have a bunch of MMA fighters. Only a very few. Maybe even one is good enough. Because they sponsor other athletes anyway,
Is it the Marion approach where you can get some of these MMA fighters for fairly cheap and they have large name values?
I mean, I can't reveal the prices, but let's say the money that Marion pays to a guy who's like 3-1 or 4-0 fighting a very small promotion is so much better than some of the North American guys are making on Bellator.
Oh, really?
So, I mean, I don't know if I want to say that they're paying so cheap. In North American standard.
No, I wasn't saying like it came across poorly. I meant in comparison, like Marion getting like a big baseball player is like impossible.
Oh, yeah, of course. There's no way.
But MMA fighters are on the scale of professional athletes, much more affordable.
Same theory as a Helio, right? Who sponsors that, used to sponsor a lot of Japanese MMA fighter because they can't be spending money to sponsor baseball or soccer players. It's just too expensive.
Right.
Yeah, in that sense, yes, of course. It's compared to the other professional sports. Still, MMA is a little bit cheaper, but except guys like Asakura.
Well, that'd be impossible.
It's almost same level, right? Or even better than the other guys, in the baseball. Yeah. And
I mean, I don't think he could get Mikado. I think Mikado would rather just, if he's going to do T-shirts, just sell his own.
Right. Yeah. And let me tell you this: that I can't reveal the prices, but let's say if your sponsor approaches RIZIN and says, "Oh, I want to sponsor this fighter," because that does happen a lot, right? Of course.
Yes.
And the minimum they would have to pay for the smallest logo on the shorts is something that you'll be surprised. I'm like, "Oh, that's the minimum price." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's something that the majority of North American sponsor would be, "Oh, that's too much." You know,
it's interesting you mentioned that because I remember Sky Perfect is a pretty big sponsor of the Japanese MMA scene. And my impression was that they would go to like a promotion, say like Deep, and they would say, we want to sponsor a fighter. And then Deep kind of recommends the fighter for them to sponsor.
Right.
Because a couple years earlier last year, all of the Sky Perfect stuff was the Sakura girl.
Right.
And then she went crazy, kind of, and it hasn't been seen since.
Right. Before that was Kanna, right?
Yes,
and,
exactly.
Reina, who paid for her, training in the States,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting how that works. Is that how it works? I mean, there's no way that's how it works in the U.S., right? They just go to the fighter's management directly.
Depends, especially in that sense, because Sky Perfect was the Deepest Erie like main sponsor. So
Right.
I think Saiki was very generous of including girl like Sakura and a few of their fighters into this package deal where they get a monthly or yearly salary. I mean, I'm telling this that like Sakura, I get this right now on the record. The money Sky ticket that Saiki got for her is something that any American fighter would be dreamed of.
Right, like not even just that. Like her face was plastered all over the internet. It was on advertisements. Just the exposure level alone would have been worth it.
Yeah, but again, do they really need that exposure too? I think the fact is maybe the president really likes that sport. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or they could get a better sport exposure elsewhere. And I tell this again on the record that still the many Japanese businesses consider dealing with the MMA promotion to be a little risky because some still believes that there's a connection to so-called yakuzas or mobster or not pleasant people part of the society. So
I feel like if you're donating from a pachinko parlor, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I know, and it's funny that the Japanese now, like from like maybe a decade ago, they had this word called compliance. They always care about that. They use that word as they sometimes excuse not do a lot of stuff, but they cared so much about just in case if some bad thing happens, Yeah, it's weird. But anyway, so let's say we quickly talk about Deep 106. They have a show this weekend because it's over 1 hour. Let's see what's on their card this time. Let's see.
Omigawa's retirement bout.
Right. And also, I have to mention that the Shinryu Makoto's fight got postponed.
Yes.
And it's not only him, but they had a couple of fighters who got tested positive for COVID, so they had to move around. Yeah. So it's really too bad,
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, that's with that fight, it would have really helped round this card out. But I mean, it's still a great card. Daisuke Nakamura's back. Was stud. He looked so good in his last Rising fight. And it's kind of like the perfect last opponent for Omigawa. Both such good grapplers that I'd love to see this. And I mean, Kensho is making his debut. He left Shuto and he's coming over.
Exactly. I mean, so when you really think about it, it's almost could be the same as Trigger card. Then it could have like top 3 guys, which is a rising fighter and a bunch of upcomers and
exactly. Then you have Hiroya lower on the card, who's there because he's kind of like one of those popular because I know Mikuru on YouTube and I fight on Mikuru's channel. And so he's been on a couple cards, and every time I've seen Hiroya at an event, he's got a ton of female fans. And when his fight's over, they get up and leave. So I mean, Hiroya's got a lot of fans. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you really think about it, now I have to say that it's almost same as a Trigger card in the sense they have in top 3-4 cards, fights are with the rising fighters, and the preliminaries are something that Deep is working on for all the shows to build up a next star, right? I mean, basically,
right.
They're building up for the next challengers for the titles and stuff. So this could be actually more interesting than Trigger from that point of view.
Aside from the main event, if you remove the main events, I'm more interested in this undercard.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So if you remove the main events, I'm more interested in this undercard.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, so in that
what
sense,
do you think?
I agree with you. So I hope, like in North American or like outside of Japan, the fans who watches Rising actually maybe should start watching Deep more too.
Oh, 100%. Also, if you're interested, because if you're just interested in the future of Rising, or if you're like kind of interested in the future of the sport in Japan, Deep and Pancrase are producing a lot of the future talent. And Pancrase has kind of been on a hiatus. They're kind of getting things back up and going now. But Deep's been in full swing, and they've been producing some top fighters.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Even though they're older, I still think Daisuke Nakamura, based off his last performance, and he's been doing great. I mean, even before that, when he was fighting in Deep, he was looking great. So
and he's like a Deep's Jim Miller, right? He's so old, but he's still winning. It's amazing,
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting because he took a couple of years off, then he came back, and he's been doing great. And so I'm kind of interested. Right. Jamie wants to know, are you surprised that Omigawa never got a shot in RIZIN?
I'm reading that right now. Well, I don't know. I think Omigawa's maybe it's his wish to take it easy from his career. It's not like he's been so active, right? I bet he's...
when I think of him, the most recent stuff I think of is when he was doing that moat fighting.
Yeah, exactly. So I think he's like more into like running his gym kind of stuff, like dojo. Yeah, I mean, so he considers himself as not too active, right?
Right.
People asking big Pancrase announcement, but you know what? I don't know if they're going to announce this, but I can tell this right now. Then, here's what it is. Pancrase is going to have a little. I think they already have, but has a big management change.
Okay.
Mr. Sakai is actually stepping out of the so-called management, and one of the main sponsors, that's president of this main sponsors, are taking over so-called day-to-day operations. So I don't know if they're going to announce this, but so what's going to happen is that the visions of Sakai is no longer going to be with the Pancrase anymore. It's going to be another set of management group who is going to be managing this this old promotions on a different way. So we'll see. I heard that they're very conservative.
So is it like Don Quixote, or is it who?
It's not Don Quixote, but it's one of the pretty big, sponsors. So they got budget. So if they may be conservative, but they might do something very interesting. Who knows? So they may continue. They probably have the money to continue bringing in, non-Japanese fighter from outside Japan, kind of stuff. So we'll see.
Does this surprise you? Because it doesn't really surprise me. Because Sakai always seemed like he has a history of he fixes promotions and he sells them, and he kind of does stuff like that.
Obviously, we can talk about it. He tried, right? He tried to sell to one. He tried to sell to, few other promotions, but I think it didn't work. And I'm hearing that Mr. Sakai's real business, the other business, is doing very, very well.
Okay.
So I guess maybe he's concentrating on that a little bit more. But still, I heard he still has the big ownership, maybe even 50-50, who knows. But he still have a stake in there, so it's not like he's totally out,
Well, I hope too much doesn't change, because I love Pancrase.
Me too.
I feel like he really saved Pancrase.
I think, definitely he did, and he made it better,
Because before him, Pancrase was on like this downward spiral where they just didn't know how to adapt to the current situation, and he kind of really saved them and started producing a lot of top fighters in the promotion.
He went under the Don Quixote, and
exactly.
Just became a desk in Don Quixote Meguro office. Now Mr. Sakai picked him up and made it into back into itself.
He got Rin Nakai in there, built up the women's divisions, and he built up the men. He did a great job.
Yeah.
So hopefully he still has some insight. Plus, I love it because you go there and they have like the super fancy cameras set up. They have everything going. So it was always very high quality, which I liked.
But here's one concern I have is, again, I mentioned earlier on this podcast that they're no longer on UFC Fight Pass. Now they're in really good hands with Abema now, right? Because they're back in Abema and they're pay-per-view premium members, whatever, right? For some shows. So maybe they're shifting towards that direction instead of, because the Pancrase maybe used to be like a promotion. If you want to fight for us, then you can go to UFC kind of way, right?
Right.
It's not like that maybe anymore. Maybe they're going into the younger audience, the Abema audience, pay-per-view way.
Well, I always thought that was kind of the business model he was adapting was, I'm going to build up fighters, then sell their contracts to the UFC kind of thing.
UFC, right. But I don't think it works like that anymore. It's just hard to get the fighters into UFC. And it's not like they own fighters' contract. So it's not like they're making money off on putting a fighter into the UFC. It's just only telling the other fighters that just fight for us because we get a better path to the UFC. But I think that business model didn't really produce much results in terms of balance sheet that they have,
Well,
And I'm
them
pretty
bringing
sure
over Ray Tsuraya to me is also kind of interesting because
yeah,
it shows
exactly.
that they're interested in developing futures champions because he's a
Exactly. And
super high level prospect.
I think Ray Tsuruya could go either way because he's a good prospect. He could end up in UFC or even the Contender Series, right? It could happen.
Right.
But at the same time, if he didn't, he's still young, so it's for the younger audience that Abema likes.
Yeah.
So I think it only
Perfect.
makes sense that too. So we'll see. It's gonna be very interesting, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like I always say that Abema is gonna it's always gonna be the major player in the Japanese combat sports. It's going to be.
Yeah.
I mean, did you see the Dreamers season 3?
I have not, no.
You should, because I'm telling you, they're really producing or they're really discovering very interesting talent.
What about that show that was coming up, the EKC? Was that what it's called?
Oh, what do you mean? Like,
what was the Abema? What was the big event they were
Pound
doing?
Storm?
Yes.
Yeah, Pound Storm. Yeah, I mean, I think they're gonna start announcing cards soon, and I'm obviously talk to them, so I can't really talk so much about that. But they got very good budget, and they're willing to bring in a lot of interesting fighters from outside Japan. It's a 12,000 seats Ryogoku Kokugikan, which is a big venue, So we'll see.
Code Mayade just wrote Pound Storm, and I do agree it does kind of look strange to read. It's kind of an interesting name.
It is an interesting name. I don't know why it's only a pound, right? I mean,
yeah,
but it's obviously that Abema does this show called Dreamers with the LDH, and Pound Storm is with the LDH, so it is going to be the show that showcases a lot of fighters from the Dreamers.
Yeah.
But at the same time, to make it big, because they're gonna have like LDH big name artists performing and stuff. So to get that same level of MMA fights going, they need to spend money to get big name fighters in. So
yeah, and just my 2 cents about Abema's popularity is that Abema made Itsuki Hirata popular.
Sure.
And another fighter, Mizuki Furuse, who has like a 50-50 record, who isn't a very consistent or super high level fighter, is super popular because she was on Abema.
Right.
Like if you're on Abema, it makes you popular.
Very good point. So with the Ray Tsuruya with the Pancrase, which is on Abema now, he could be the next one to make it very famous. He could be the next Monster Energy sponsored guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, here's what it is. This is like I'm telling you over and over that I hope they will open the money they're making.
Yeah.
I really think. I mean, I know that. That's why I'm telling you this, because you're really gonna open the eyes to many, many fighters outside Japan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, I almost feel sorry for my guy. I have this one guy who's a very good guy working for me in the sponsorship sales in North America and stuff like that. And he's like spending hours scraping for hundreds of just 100, $500, that kind of stuff. It's big difference.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, anyway, so we talked a lot again today. So yeah. So we'll be back again in 2 weeks.
Yeah, we can talk about March is just packed full of events, so we'll have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
A little bit of a lull, kind of like a post New Year's Eve hangover in January and February, but
that's true.
Everything's picking up in March.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk again in 2 weeks.
Yep, sounds good.
All right. See you later.
See you then. Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.